I've heard this week about a decision purportedly taken by certain gas station dealers that they would no longer accept credit cards and debit cards, and that would be accepting cash only. Now this has a direct effect on the card, the credit card issued by the government for the government's fleet, which would be the fleet of vehicles used by the protective services and other government vehicles. So this decision on the part of these dealers to take cash only would, if it is allowed to proceed unfettered, would have the effect of grounding the government's fleet. And as Minister of Finance, I will not allow that, because the card is issued by the Ministry of Finance and there's an agreement with respect to the use of the card. There's no way I would allow this decision to ground the police and to ground the government's fleet of vehicles. So we have issued instructions to all the gas stations that are owned and operated by NP that they are to continue taking credit cards and debit cards and so on. I saw a report, I don't know how accurate it is, that Unipet has said they are continuing to take credit, so that we have reduced the number of possible stations that could do this to a relatively small number. These stations operate under a license with National Petroleum, so we'll also be looking at the terms of their license to see if they are allowed to suddenly scrap the government's cash card, the government's credit card. I don't want to venture an opinion on that right now, because again I have to get legal advice on that. But I certainly think it was a very unwise move on the part of the dealers, because they knew exactly what they were doing, that this would affect the government's fleet, not just the public. Of course it will affect the public, but it affects the fleet of government vehicles.
The decision to overturn or to instruct them to reverse their decision applies only to government vehicles, or everybody will benefit?
No. Let me change the language. I never said anything about overturning anything. What I said is that instructions have been given to the stations that are owned and operated by the state company that they should take credit, and it will apply to everybody, of course, for now. It will apply to everybody. There will be no discrimination between the general public and the government fleet. That would be unworkable, and it would be also a tremendous inconvenience. Okay?
Was there any, in considering this thing, did you all also consider the question of crime? And a lot of people have said that once the gas station only took cash, that it would expose the public seeking a service to hold ups.
Well, it's not, you see, again, I have to change the language. There's no you all in this, I didn't make the decision to take only cash, They did. And I found it very strange that they would do that in view of the fact that they now would be required to have large quantities of cash at their business places, when before a lot of the transactions could be done cashless, without cash. So it would increase their own security requirements, and I found it strange that they would actually do something like this. But that's their commercial decision.
Right. And also, was the government, or was the government also concerned that the question of only taking cash would open the way to money laundering by some of the businesses?
Actually, no, that I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for that. We had not looked at that. But, it's obviously something that I would want the ministry to look at. What we were concerned about was the fact it would effectively ground the state's fleet, and it also create tremendous inconvenience for the public. I didn't look at that, but clearly that's something we need to look at.
Mr. Minister, do you have any, but could you may not have a guarantee that the petroleum dealers may, as a result, want to accept your invitation for them to do that?
There's no invitation. What I said is that the company owned and company operated stores will be directed. There's not an invitation.
It's a direction.
Well, they're state-owned. They're owned by the state. So the state gives an instruction.
So you expect
So
the
it
government-
narrows.
I think what there is a little bit of a misunderstanding, and the minister did explain it. What we have is various categories. So there are 3 categories of how NP gas stations are run. So there's one category that's completely run by NP. So that's a continuum, right? So there's no issue of anything there. They've been instructed by their owner, NP, to continue taking credit cards, debit cards, the state fleet cards. There's another category, which is, and then he could give a better explanation, there's another category that is dealership owned, and those is leased to the dealers. Those are the ones who've indicated this. But there's a third category, it's a franchise category that again have been instructed to continue. Now, with that second category of the dealership owned ones, what the minister is indicating is we're now looking at the terms of the contractual arrangement between themselves and NP, and we're going to be looking at it very assiduously. So if it is that they don't want to continue in a relationship, that's a decision for them. But very, very likely, the terms of the arrangement between the Ministry of Finance and the gas stations for them to utilize the cards, you can't change those terms unilaterally. So this is something we're going to be looking at. But the vast majority of gas stations fall into those other 2 categories, and there is a continuum. There has been no break in it, so there is no issue arising of security, etc., because the Minister of Finance quite quickly stepped in and got rid of a potential situation that now no longer exists.
And that's why I didn't understand the question. Since NP is a 100% state enterprise, the Minister of Finance is the corporation's soul, is the shareholder of all state enterprises. So if the Minister of Finance gives an instruction to a state enterprise, they must comply. That's why I didn't understand the question. So I apologize for not understanding the question.
Ian Wason, CTV. One of the concerns the dealers had was the fact that the profit margin is not sustainable with the use of the cards, hence they were going with the cash. Is there any consideration by the government to decrease the rates?
As a responsible government, we are looking at that matter, but that matter needs careful review. What I saw the complaint was that some gas station operators were complaining that they have to pay business levy and green fund. Now, let me explain how those 2 levies work. Those are for companies that do not declare profits. So you only pay these levies if you have not declared a profit. They are now saying that paying these very small taxes, very small in percentage terms, 2%, 1%, that kind of thing, that would cause them to go bankrupt. But it means, if I take the information on the face of it without drilling into it to find out what the truth is, that they haven't been declaring a profit for a very, very long time. Because that's the purpose of the green fund and the business levies, to go after those businesses who sue for year after year after year. It was first introduced in Mexico 25 years ago. We had chronic losers, companies in operation for 30 years, never pay tax because they're always losing money. So these taxes like the business levy come in, it's a tax on the gross sales. So it has nothing to do with whether you make a profit or not. So they are complaining that the increases in the business levy will cause them to go bankrupt. I am not sure I can accept an argument like that just on the face of it. Because why are you running a business that is continuously losing money? Why are you in business to lose money? It doesn't really make any sense. But as a responsible government, we listen. I've heard what they have to say. We're going to take a very clinical look at the traditional or typical expenses of a gas station operator. Look at their income, look at their expenditure, and see whether there's any merit whatsoever in increasing the margin. But it's certainly not going to have a knee-jerk reaction to just jump and increase the profit margin for gas stations. Okay? But we will be looking at it as a responsible government.
Minister, you did clarify that it's an instruction given
To company-owned stations, yes.
and the expectation is that it will comply. What would happen if any...
No, I don't anticipate that. No, that I don't. That's a hypothetical question. I don't anticipate that any company-owned station owned by a wholly owned state enterprise would not comply. I don't anticipate it, so I don't think no need to go down that road. I don't anticipate that. Okay, if it happens, maybe it's a miscommunication which will be easily resolved very quickly, but it's not likely to happen. Okay? I don't need to do that. The Ministry of Finance, the Permanent Secretary, the Controller of Accounts who manages the cash card, they swung into action immediately and they're handling it. Okay? I'm simply reporting. The public servants are already dealing with it. They've dealt with it already.